All right, let's jump into another deep dive. This time, we're focusing on an animal that proves size isn't everything when it comes to making an impact.
You got it.
The sun bear. We've got this really cool excerpt, and it digs way deeper than just the basic facts.
Oh, cool.
It's all about the sun bear's massive role in the rainforest, even though it's the smallest bear species out there.
It's amazing, right? Like, we always think of bears as these massive, powerful creatures,
Totally.
but the sun bear kind of flips that whole idea on its head. They've perfectly adapted to their rainforest home, and their impact on that whole ecosystem is just, well, huge.
That's what I'm so pumped to explore. And get this, the excerpt calls them honey bears.
Oh,
I
yes.
gotta admit, that nickname alone has me hooked.
It's pretty fitting, actually. Honey and insects are like their favorite foods.
Mhm.
And to get to that sweet stuff, they've developed this incredible tool, a tongue that can stretch a whopping 8 to 10 inches.
Whoa, seriously.
Yep. Think about it, that's longer than most smartphones.
That's some serious tongue action. It really makes you picture them, weaving through those crazy rainforest environments to get to those treats. So just how big are we talking about here?
They're the smallest bear species, for sure. They only get to about 4 to 5 feet long and weigh up to 150 pounds max.
Ah,
You could almost picture them as a big, fluffy dog, but like way more agile and with a lot more personality.
I love that. And their coat, it's like this sleek black, perfect for blending into those shadows in Southeast Asian rainforest.
Oh, and don't forget that iconic chest patch.
Oh, right.
Often this bright yellowish orange or white, sometimes even other shades, shaped just like a crescent moon. It's
Yeah.
almost like nature's own rising sun symbol right there on their chest.
Okay, I'm officially obsessed.
Yeah.
But before we go full-on adorable bear overload, let's get back to the source. It mentions they eat more than just honey. What else are these omnivore extraordinaires munching on?
Well, they're expert foragers, that's for sure. They love fruits, especially juicy figs, but they're not picky.
Right.
They'll also go for termites, ants, and even a small animal if the opportunity pops up.
So it's like the perfect mix of sweet and savory, but that diverse diet, I'm guessing it's not just about satisfying their taste buds.
You got it. It plays a vital role in the whole rainforest ecosystem.
Go on.
Think of all that fruit they eat, right? They become these super important seed dispersers, which means they help rainforest plants spread and grow all over the place.
Mm.
And by keeping those insect populations under control, they're preventing imbalances that could really mess things up for the whole ecosystem.
I never thought about it like that. These little actions have such a huge domino effect. So where in the world can we find these little ecological heroes?
They call the tropical rainforests of Southeast Asia home. Places like Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, you name it.
Ah.
They're like hidden gems tucked away in these lush, vibrant landscapes.
And hidden is the key word, right?
Yeah,
These bears are practically ninjas, especially with how much they love hanging out, well, literally hanging out high up in the trees.
exactly. They're arboreal, which basically means they're tree dwellers.
Right.
And that's huge for them. It affects everything, their diet, how they socialize, even the dangers they face.
I'm realizing their entire existence is linked to the fate of the rainforest. It's like their story tells us how healthy that whole ecosystem is.
And unfortunately, that story gets a little, well, a little sad. We look at what they're up against right now.
Oh, yeah.
The IUCN, they've listed sun bears as vulnerable, which means they're facing a real risk of becoming endangered.
That's definitely worrying. What's pushing them toward that vulnerable status?
Well, the biggest culprit is habitat loss, without a doubt. We were talking about how dependent they are on the rainforest, but those rainforests are just shrinking. It's crazy.
Yes, it's like their home is just disappearing bit by bit. And we haven't even gotten into the direct threats, have we?
Unfortunately not. Poaching is a huge issue. Sun bears are hunted for their gallbladders.
Oh,
People
yeah.
use them in traditional medicine, even though, honestly, there's no real scientific proof they work.
It's so messed up that something meant to heal ends up harming these incredible animals.
I know, and
Yeah.
the demand for their parts isn't just local. There's this massive, complicated network, the illegal wildlife trade.
Yeah.
It spans the entire world, and it's a serious threat. They're captured and sold as exotic pets, which means even fewer left in the wild.
It breaks my heart to think of them taken from their home and forced into captivity. So it's like a triple whammy: habitat loss, poaching, and this illegal trade. It's pretty grim. But I'm really hoping there are people out there fighting for them.
There are, absolutely. Dedicated people and organizations working nonstop to protect these bears. And their efforts are pretty amazing.
That's good to hear. Let's dig into that a bit because I think we could all use a little hope right now. What are some of the strategies they're using to protect these bears?
One of the best things is setting up protected areas within their habitat,
Okay.
like national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, even community-managed forests where stuff like logging and hunting is totally off limits.
So basically, creating safe havens where they can thrive without constantly looking over their shoulder.
Exactly. And it's not just good for the sun bears. These areas protect all sorts of plants and animals, which means better biodiversity for the whole region.
A win-win for conservation. But I imagine actually enforcing these protections, especially in remote rainforest areas, must be a nightmare.
You're telling me. That's where anti-poaching patrols come in. Dedicated teams, often people from the local communities and park rangers, working nonstop to patrol these areas.
Oh.
They track down poachers, confiscate illegal stuff, the whole 9 yards.
They're like rainforest superheroes, putting their lives on the line for these bears.
They are, and their work is beyond important. By stopping poaching and making those sun bear parts harder to get on that illegal market, they're actually cutting down on demand. It's about hitting the problem right at the source.
I like it. It's a proactive approach instead of just reacting to the damage after it's done. We also talked about those public awareness campaigns earlier. Where do those fit in?
Awareness is so important. The more people know about sun bears, how important they are to the ecosystem, what they're up against, the more likely people are to step up and actually do something.
It's about turning apathy into action, basically.
Exactly. And there are so many awesome ways to do that. Educational programs in schools, stuff on social media that can go viral.
Yeah.
Even just sharing a post about sun bear conservation can make a difference.
It's about giving a platform to those who are already fighting for them, making sure their story gets heard. And speaking of stories, I'm really intrigued by this Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Center. What kind of work are they doing?
The Bornean Sun Bear Conservation Center, it's in Malaysia, and it's an amazing example of an organization making a real difference.
Okay.
They rescue and rehab sun bears that have been orphaned, injured, or saved from the illegal wildlife trade. But they also do research, educate people, and advocate for these bears. It's pretty impressive.
It's like a multi-pronged attack, hitting the problem from all sides. Tell me more about that rescue and rehab process. What does that actually look like?
Imagine a sun bear that's been caught in a poacher's trap or found all alone.
Yeah.
They come to the center, often traumatized, hurt, and scared. The team there gives them medical care, good food, and a safe space to heal and recover.
It must be incredible to see that transformation, those bears getting their strength back.
Oh, it is. The goal is to eventually release them back into the wild if possible.
Oh, okay.
They give them the skills they need to survive out there. But for some, their injuries are just too bad, or the trauma is too much.
That's so sad. But it sounds like the center gives them a place to live out their days peacefully and with dignity.
Yes, exactly. They've got these big natural enclosures that are almost like a mini rainforest, and the staff works hard to keep the bears happy and active.
That's fantastic. But they do more than just care for individual bears, right?
Right. What I find so inspiring about them is that they don't just focus on one thing. They do research and education, too. How does that all tie in to those broader conservation efforts? Well, they're studying sun bear ecology and behavior in the wild,
Right.
which helps us understand how to protect them better. They're also looking into the illegal wildlife trade, like mapping those trafficking routes and figuring out who the major players are.
So it's like gathering intel to fuel those boots-on-the-ground conservation efforts. And what about their education programs? Who are they teaching, and what kind of impact are they having?
They're reaching out to everyone, from locals to tourists from all over the world.
Wow.
They've got programs for schools, they train local guides to be sun bear ambassadors, and they even have events at the center to get the public involved.
Ah, cool.
People can actually see the bears in their enclosures, learn about how they behave, and really understand what they're up against.
It's like turning every visitor into a potential advocate for these bears.
Exactly. And it works wonders. People go there thinking it'll be a fun day out, and they leave feeling connected to these amazing animals and wanting to help protect them.
It really shows how powerful personal connections can be. But let's get back to the sun bears themselves for a minute. We've talked about their size, diet, that they love trees. What else makes them so unique?
Well, we touched on that crazy long tongue of theirs, remember?
Huh?
Up to 10 inches. It's this perfect adaptation that lets them get deep into those tree hollows and termite mounds
Right.
to slurp up insects, honey, and fruit.
It's like nature's built-in straw. And I bet their claws are pretty impressive too, considering they're practically professional tree climbers.
Absolutely. Those strong, curved claws are made for climbing.
Yeah.
They can scale trees insanely fast, super agile.
So they're like the acrobats of the rainforest, moving through those trees with ease.
And those claws aren't just for climbing. They use them to dig, too.
Oh.
Yeah, to get into those termite mounds and beehives for a tasty snack.
Huh?
Talk about multi-purpose tools.
It's amazing how their whole body is perfectly suited to rainforest life. But what about their social side? We know they like to be alone, but do they ever interact?
They do. Even though they're mostly loners, except for, mating season or moms with cubs,
Right, right.
they've got ways to communicate, like using scent and sounds. It's like their own little rainforest language.
I love that. Tell me more about the scent thing. How does that work?
Well, they have these scent glands, one on their chest and one near their rear end. And they rub these glands against trees and stuff to leave their scent behind. Like, hey, I was here.
So it's their way of marking their territory, letting other sun bears know they're around. That's pretty cool. And what are the sounds? What kind of noises do they make?
Oh, they've got a whole repertoire. Grunts, growls, squeals, whimpers, you name it.
Wow.
These sounds can be warnings about danger, showing aggression, or even just like playful stuff.
So even though they're solitary, they still have ways to make themselves heard when they need to. But with all the threats they face, I'm wondering about how they reproduce. How do they even find mates and raise their young in such a tough environment?
Sun bear mating season usually happens around May and June. That's when males and females start looking for each other using those scents and sounds we talked about. That's like a rainforest romance.
Ah, I love that. So what happens once they've found each other and mated?
Well, after about 95 days, the female gives birth, usually one or two cubs. And they have their babies in a den high up in a tree hollow for safety.
Those little cubs are born into a world of giant trees and hidden dangers. Must be a pretty rough start.
You're not wrong. The cubs are born blind and completely helpless. They need their mom for everything, food, protection, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
She nurses them for months and teaches them all the important survival skills, like climbing, finding food, and staying out of trouble.
Those mama bear instincts are strong. But how long do the cubs stay with their mom?
They usually stick around for about 2 years, learning all they need to know to survive on their own.
Makes sense. But it must also be a pretty vulnerable time for them, right? With habitat loss and poaching and all that.
Yeah, it's a harsh reality. Even with all the efforts to protect them, those threats are still very real. So we've talked a lot about conservation, but I'm curious about what you think the future holds for sun bears. What needs to happen to make sure they're around for a long time?
That's a great question.
I think the most important thing is tackling deforestation head-on. As long as people keep cutting down rainforests for timber, palm oil, and other stuff, sun bears will keep losing their home.
Right. So it's not enough just to create protected areas. We need to change those systems that are causing the problem in the first place.
Exactly. We need to be smarter about what we buy and support companies that do things sustainably. If we can cut down demand for the stuff that's destroying rainforests, we'll be making a big difference.
I see what you mean. It's about recognizing that our choices, even the little ones, have an impact all over the world. But what about poaching and the illegal wildlife trade? How do we deal with that?
We need laws that are tougher on those who exploit wildlife, plain and simple. Make the punishment so harsh that it's just not worth the risk for poachers and traffickers.
So basically, send a strong message. Mess with wildlife and you'll pay the price. But laws alone can't solve it, right? We also need to tackle the demand for those illegal products.
You're absolutely right. We need to educate people.
Yeah.
Show them how cruel these practices are and that there's no proof these bear parts actually work like medicine.
It's about changing how people think and busting those myths. But it's not just about changing minds, it's also about giving them alternatives, right?
Absolutely. We should support traditional healers who are doing things the right way, sustainably and ethically. And we need to promote plant-based alternatives to things like bear bile. People should be able to get health care without harming endangered species.
Right, it's all connected. Human health, the environment, everything. I'm also curious about how technology can be used to protect sun bears.
Oh, tech is becoming super useful in conservation. For example, camera traps are awesome for keeping an eye on sun bear populations.
Oh, okay.
They give us really valuable data to help plan conservation strategies.
So it's like having hidden cameras in the rainforest, watching over them without being intrusive.
Exactly. And drones are another big one.
Oh, right.
They can survey massive areas, spot deforestation, and even help track down poachers. It's like having a bird's eye view of the